on our Facebook sites and other places. So my name is Matt O'Brien. I'm the program manager in the Tech Engagement Office. We welcome you to our Tech Engagement Office webinar on intellectual property. We're happy to have Dr. Gary DeBoer as our speaker today. Gary is joining us from LaTourneau University, where he's a professor and also a patent agent. He's working with our Tech Engagement Office this summer through the AFRL Summer Faculty Fellowship Program. And he's going to be sharing with us a series of presentations on intellectual property and how you can benefit from intellectual property and really everything you need to know about intellectual property. Also on the call with us today, we have Anna Kutula. She's our IP lead at the lab and also a patent agent. She'll be available for questions towards the end of the presentation. So thank you for joining us, and go ahead and take it away, Gary.
Hi, thank you, Matthew. It's great to be here with the Air Force Research Lab this summer. As we get started, I'd like to tell a little personal story. My first job as a bachelor degree chemist was for this company, Gentex Corporation, and we made these automatic rear view mirrors that automatically dimmed when a car came up from behind you at night. There's a lot of chemistry involved, and I learned a lot of chemistry working with them. But it was a small company, so I learned a lot of other stuff too. Things like accounting and how to work with production engineers and manufacturing and things like that. The company had several patents on this technology, and so here's an example of one. And there was a time when another mirror company started manufacturing mirrors very similar to ours, and this led to a big litigation battle in the courts. And my boss, Harlan Biker, asked me one time to bring a mirror to the lawyers on my way home from work. And so I did so, brought the mirror to the lawyers at their hotel on my way home. And I was about to leave after dropping off the mirror, but they asked me to stay and answer some questions about things. And so they grilled me for about an hour. It was about a number of things with respect to the mirror and the competitor's mirror and things like this. So the next day I went to work, and my boss asked me, how'd it go with the lawyers? And I said, great, I dropped off the mirror, and that was it. I got my job done. And he said to me, well, Gary, that dropping off the mirror was just a ruse. The real job was to talk to the lawyers there. And actually you didn't do very well in your conversations with them. We were going to put you on the stand, but after your talk with the lawyers, I guess we're not. And I felt kind of bad. I felt like I dropped the ball, let down my boss. And I thought, man, I really need to learn more about this patent law stuff so that I can better answer these questions with respect to, what the lawyers were asking me. And if you listen to these podcasts put out by the AFRL Lab Life people, that's what Major General Timothy Kelly was talking about as well, getting smart about intellectual property. So if you haven't heard that podcast, I encourage you to go in there and do that. So we want to get smart here about intellectual property. And the first thing to do then is to know, well, what is a patent? And this is what a patent is. A patent is a right to exclude others from making, using, offering for sale, or selling your invention throughout the United States, or importing that invention into the United States. And if the invention is a process, it gives you the right to exclude others from doing the same with products made by that process. So what a patent is a right to exclude others from this whole list of things here. So the Gentex patent gave Gentex the right to exclude those other mirror manufacturers from making and selling mirrors that were the same as what Gentex had patented. And this whole idea of patent law goes back to the Constitution in Article 1, Section 8, where it says to promote the progress of science and useful arts by securing for limited times to authors and inventors the exclusive rights to their respective writings and discoveries. So what are these respective writings and discoveries that are mentioned that we think about as intellectual property? Well, we can put them into these categories here. Patents, which we talked a little bit about already. Copyrights is what's used for literature and music, to designate this is the artist's work. Trademarks are logos, things like IBM, Apple, those are trademarks. And there's another area of intellectual property we sometimes talk about, trade secrets. And IP law talks about trade secrets, but doesn't really protect the trade secrets. Trade secrets are protected by the owners of those secrets, and so long as they're a secret, they're protected. And that's sort of how it goes there with trade secrets. So under patents, there's three types: design, utility, and plant patents. Here's an example of an Air Force design patent, and you can tell it's a design patent because there's a D right there in the patent number. Here's an Air Force trademark, and here is an Air Force copyright. And of course, the Air Force has its trade secrets as well, things that it keeps secret that it doesn't patent or copyright or trademark. Now, the Air Force is very similar to Coca-Cola then. Coca-Cola has a trademark, that scripted Coca-Cola. It's got patents on the design of the bottle here. And Coca-Cola also has a song that's copyrighted. And the formula for Coca-Cola is a trade secret. So there you go, the Air Force and Coca-Cola, very similar. Let's talk some more about patents here and the different types of patents. We talked about the fact that you have utility and design and plant patents. For utility patents, we oftentimes talk about different categories, one being a process, such as the Haber process, a process of making something. There's also machines, like a sewing machine. Could be a product. There's also manufactured items. And lastly, there's these compositions of matter. That's a chemistry sort of thing. And this molecule here might be a drug for some purpose. And there it is. For design patents, we talk about ornamental designs, like this hood ornament. So the design is not a functional one, but it's just purely a how does it look sort of thing. And for plant patents, we're talking about plants. So there you go. Not chemical plants, but biological plants like roses. So you might ask, why patent? Over on the right there, you see George Washington Carver, famous agronomist and botanist. Did a lot of work with peanuts and products made with peanuts. And his idea was just to put everything out there and let the world use it as they see fit. On the left, you see Percy Julian, another chemist, who patented over 130 different things in his life and his career in the pharmaceutical industry. So how do you weigh these different approaches, these different philosophies with respect to patenting? And so that brings us to our first poll question. And if Noah can help us out here and put up that poll question, let's ask you, are you a George Washington Carver, believing everybody's open source sort of stuff, or are you a Percy Julian? And we'll give you a few minutes there to answer that survey. How are we doing with the results there, Noah?
As of right now, we actually do not have any results. So if people are having trouble clicking into it, go. If it did not pop up on your screen, look at the bottom of your page, and they should be there to show. And it'll pop up, and then you can select your results. And right now, we did just get one in, and that is Percy Julian. Oh, we got two in for Percy Julian right now.
Oh, great. Okay, we'll give you another few seconds here. Give you another 5 seconds or so. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. All right, Noah, you want to show us the results?
Okay, so just ended the polling, and now I'm sharing the results. So we did just get. It appears that you actually have to answer all of them to be able to submit your result for the first one. But we did just get 2 for Percy Julian and 0 for Washington.
All right.
Washington Carver.
Okay. Well, I guess we're talking to the choir here. Thanks, Noah.
No problem.
Okay. All right, so let's talk about why we should patent here. Here's the neighborhood right next to the campus where a lot of faculty and staff live. And in this little area, in this circle here, is a vacant lot where my son and his friends would play airsoft guns, shooting at each other and things like that, and having a great time. They'd bring in barricades of cardboard boxes and stuff like that. And that was all good. Nobody cared. Everybody was happy that they were playing off there in the vacant lot. And here was our house, and we didn't want those kids playing in our house because they'd be jumping over the couches and chairs and everything else, and that would be bad because we put a lot of investment into our house and we didn't want it destroyed by a bunch of teenage airsoft gun shooters. In fact, most of us have a survey of our property such that we can then claim this is ours and exclude other people from using that property, as you can see in this survey. And so there you go. The idea is that we have some investment in this property, and that needs protection from these adolescent airsoft kids. If there's no big investment, like in a big vacant lot, well, you can let things go as you want, and nobody really cares if somebody uses that. So one reason to patent is that patent property requires investment. If it does, it needs some protection. Let's talk about another situation. Here's a clock. So nice clock. And over here on the right we have an alarm clock. Very similar, except the one on the right has an alarm system on it. Now, if the inventor of the clock had patented that original clock, and someone else had developed an alarm system to be attached to the clock, the alarm inventor could patent the alarm part, but he would have to get an agreement, a license agreement from the clock patent owner in order to sell the alarm clock. If the original inventor of the clock had not patented his clock, well, then the inventor of the alarm portion could sell an alarm clock without asking anybody any permission because there was no claim on that original clock. So, if you don't patent your clock as an inventor, you've got no power with respect to limiting people from using that invention in other things, in the improvements thereof. And if the improvement is the only thing that's on the market, you're stuck buying that thing that's on the market. So, the second reason why we might want to patent is if you don't patent the invention, the improvements on the invention can be patented by somebody else. And this is particularly important to the Air Force because this may result in the Air Force paying twice. One, to develop the technology, maybe it was a clock, and then second, to buy the clock in the form of an alarm clock, which is the only thing that might be available on the market. And so we want to make sure that the taxpayers get their return on their investment. We want to make sure then that Air Force inventions are properly claimed as a patent. So a third reason here is if Air Force doesn't patent, the taxpayers may pay twice. So let's look at this Air Force manufacturing cycle here a little bit more. Here you'll see a wheel within a wheel. In this inner wheel, you can see that there are inventions and evaluations, and then the claiming of those inventions as intellectual property. You go on to market it and sell those devices. And if there's agreements with respect to the licensing to the manufacturers, those devices might come back to the Air Force at a good price through procurement. And then also some of the revenues might end up going to the inventors of that stuff that the Air Force developed. So, in this particular case, we see that that's a good deal. The inventors might get something out of this. And this brings us then to our second survey question. What percent of the revenue does the inventor receive? Noah, do you have that poll survey ready to go?
Yes, sir. I just launched it now, so if everybody would like to answer their questions again, and if you already answered those prior, I would encourage you guys to rethink your answers with this new knowledge given forth by Gary.
All right, so we'll give them a few seconds there to get their answers in. Is it 20% of the revenue goes to the inventor, 30%, 40%, or 50% going to the inventor? Okay, we'll give you a few more seconds here to answer this question. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. I know you want to share the results with us?
It looks like we have a clear favorite here. 20% here got 100% of the votes, with all 3 people picking 20% of the revenue.
Okay, so you're all wrong, those who chose 20%. The Air Force actually shares 50%. I think the rule is at least 20, and the Air Force shares 50% of the revenues with Air Force inventors. So that's a good thing to learn if you're looking for some revenues. So another reason you might want to patent is that this technology cycle can be increased through patenting and licensing and returning those inventions back to the research lab, which then invents new things. So it allows the transfer of technology for purposes of accelerating development of new technology. And a fifth reason here is that a percent of the revenue goes to the inventor. And for the Air Force, that percent is 50%, which is a pretty good return for the inventor. So you should all celebrate that. And here's a last sort of reason here for patenting. You'll see here a beach full of sand, and you can think of sand as not being worth a whole lot, except for maybe sand castles and sand bags and things like this. But we all know that we can make wafers from this sand, and these computer use and semiconductor wafers can be very valuable. So another reason for patenting is that this creates economic value. The intellectual property involved in creating those wafers has value in itself, and this adds to the greater economic wealth of the nation, and that's another reason for patenting. All right, so that brings us to a third survey question. We have these 6 possible reasons to patent. And Noah, if you can pull up that poll question, let's see what our audience thinks as the best reason to patent.
Yep, I just opened up the polls now, and we are starting to get votes in already.
Great. So which is the best reason to patent? Is it 1, property that requires investment needs protection? Or 2, if you don't patent the invention, the improvements on the invention can be patented by somebody else. 3, if you don't patent, taxpayers may pay twice with respect to the Air Force Research Lab. 4, patenting allows transfer of technology for purposes of accelerating development of new technology. 5, a very self-oriented sort of reason, a percent of the revenue goes to the inventor, which isn't a bad reason, but it's still there. And 6, to create new economic value. All right, do we have any results, Mr. Noah?
Yes, we do have 3 votes in already, and it looks like a couple more are starting to come in.
Okay, well, wait a few more seconds then. We'll give our audience about 5 more seconds here. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Okay, Noah, would you like to share the results with us?
Well, it looks like we have a 3-way tie for the votes. We have a tie between 3. If you don't patent, taxpayers may pay twice.
Mm-hmm.
4, always allows transfer of technology for purposes of accelerating development of new technology, and 5% of the revenue goes to the inventor. They were all tied.
Wow, okay. Well, those are all good reasons. It's hard to say exactly which reason is best, but there you go. It's a nice question to ask. Okay. And this kind of brings us back to where we started then, since we talked about George Washington Carver and Percy Julian. I'm wondering if there's been any change in how our audience feels about who they prefer to be, a George Washington Carver or a Percy Julian. So Noah, if you can load that survey question number 4, let's ask our audience like this question again and see if there's any difference this time. I think everybody was a Percy Julian before. We'll see if they were unconvinced by my arguments and become a George Washington Carver.
Yep, I just launched it now. Let's see if the votes start rolling in.
Okay, so the question is, are you a George Washington Carver that is open source, just put it out there for the public use? Or are you a Percy Julian, claim your inventions and use those to further your industrial and commercial purposes? So A for George Washington Carver, B for Percy Julian. Okay, we'll give you a few more seconds here to enter some results. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. All right, Noah, you want to share some results with us?
Yep. So, sorry, I'm getting a bit of a lag. Give me 1 second.
Okay.
Okay, so I just finished the polling here, and it looks like we did have a bit of a mix-up. So now we have 3 votes for Percy Julian and 1 vote for George Washington Carver.
Okay. So maybe that person came in later, didn't hear the whole story, or maybe they changed from a Percy Julian to a George Washington Carver. It's not an easy thing to decide what technology should be patented and what shouldn't. Sometimes there's good questions about what should be patented and what's not. All right, so let's look back at what we talked about today. We talked about what is a patent and why we should patent. In our next webinar, we're going to talk about what is a patentable invention. And then we'll talk about the patent application process in the third webinar. And in our last webinar, we'll talk about engaging with the Tech Engagement Office there at Kirtland Air Force Base. So next week, we'll talk about the 3 laws of patentability, Title 35, USC 101, which talks about patentable subject matter. And we'll talk about Title 35, USC 102, which talks about novelty. Is this a new thing? And then USC 103, which is, it might be new, but is it obvious or not obvious? It has to be not obvious in order for you to get a patent on these things. If you're wanting to study up before next week's webinar and learn more about patents and patent law yourself, I suggest you go to the uspto.gov site, and in the little search window there you can enter MPEP, which will lead you to a site to download the Manual of Patent Examining Procedure, which has all the knowledge of the universe with respect to U.S. patenting in it for you to read. If you don't want to read this 1,000-some page volume, you can ask your local tech engagement officer and USPTO patent agent, Anna Catilla here, who is one of our panelists in this discussion. And you can talk to anybody in the tech engagement office here, including our program manager, Matthew O'Brien. And with that, I'll give it back to you, Matthew.
Thanks, Gary. Great job. So we'll open it up to our participants or our attendees. If there's any questions about the material today, you can use the chat function, or you can, I'm not sure if we can unmute our attendees. Noah, can we do that? But if you do have questions, please feel free to ask them now. And this can be on the material that was covered today, or any other specific patent questions. If you have an invention and would like to discuss it, happy to talk about some of those things. Or you can catch up with us offline as well.
Matt, can you hear me okay? This is
Yes.
Dave Narciso.
Hey, Dave.
Okay. I just wanted to do one clarification. From a legalistic perspective, with respect to patenting the invention and improvements, whether you patent the invention or not, others can obtain patents on the improvement, but they will not be able to practice that improvement incorporating your base invention. So it kind of delays them until your patent is expired. But it does encourages licensing, and so if you are the first to patent, you're in the prime position for others that see your patent and want to practice it with other thoughts that they have, and that will often happen in the technology areas where once the base patent or say various improvements of base technology are available as a item of knowledge based on the patent issuing, then others that are motivated would often seek a license as they develop their improvements to that technology. So it's important to get the patent out there, otherwise others can actually practice the invention without compensation to the originator. That's the importance of patenting first.
Great. Thanks for that comment, Dave. Appreciate that. That was Dave Narciso, who is also a patent attorney supporting our lab at AFRL headquarters in Dayton, Ohio. So he's also available for questions at this time as well.
Yeah, if there's no questions, I would just like to encourage the scholars, the student scholars that may be watching this at a later time, to think about taking a course in intellectual property law, even if they don't plan to go into law or something like that. If you get a job in industry or research or any place, it's good to know a little bit about intellectual property law, even if you're not the person directly involved, because what you know can help those patent agents and patent attorneys when it comes time to draft a patent for things that you might invent during your career as a scientist or an engineer. So I think it's beneficial, just like you need to know how to write to be a good scientist or engineer. You need to know how to communicate with other people if you're a good scientist or engineer. You also need to know a little bit about the laws that govern the things that you hope to produce as a scientist or engineer. So I would encourage you to find a course, even if it's like an edX course or something, and learn a little bit about intellectual property law before, or even if you have started your career, early on in your career?
So with that, if there's no more questions, we invite you to tune in next Wednesday, the 22nd at noon Mountain Time for our next presentation. If you enjoyed today's presentation, we encourage you to let your colleagues know about this. If you're a scholar mentor, we highly encourage you to share this with your students or let other summer interns know about this at this series of presentations. And thank you all for joining us today. We really appreciate it.